Book 2, Chapter 14 of the Lancashire Witches. This recording is in the public domain. Reading by Andy Minter. The Lancashire Witches, a Romance of Pendle Forest, by William Harrison Ainsworth. Book 2, Pendle Forest. Chapter 14. How Rough Lee was again besieged. Parson Holden, it will be remembered, left Rough Lee charged by Potts with a message to Sir Ralph Assheton, informing him of his detention and that of Roger Nowell by Mistress Nutter, and imploring him to come to their assistance without delay. Congratulating himself on his escape, but apprehensive of pursuit, the worthy rector, who, as a keen huntsman, was extremely well mounted, made the best of his way, and had already passed the gloomy gorge through which Pendle Water swept, had climbed the hill beyond it, and was crossing the moor, now alone lying between him and Goldshaw, when he heard a shout behind him, and turning at the sound, beheld Blackadder and another mounted serving man issuing from a thicket, and spurring furiously after him. Relying upon the speed of his horse, he disregarded their cries, and accelerated his pace, but in spite of this, his pursuers gained upon him rapidly. While debating the question of resistance or surrender, the rector descried Bess Whitaker coming towards him from the opposite direction, a circumstance that greatly rejoiced him, for, aware of her strength and courage, he felt sure he could place as much dependence upon her in this emergency as on any man in the county. Bess was riding a stout, rough-looking nag, apparently well able to sustain her weight, and carried the redoubtable horsewhip with her. On the other hand, Holden had been recognised by Bess, who came up just as he was overtaken and seized by his assailants, one of whom caught hold of his cassock and tore it from his back, while the other, seizing hold of his bridle, endeavoured, in spite of his efforts to the contrary, to turn his horse round. Many oaths, threats, and blows were exchanged during the scuffle, which no doubt would have terminated in the rector's defeat, and his compulsory return to Rough Lee, had it not been for the opportune arrival of Bess, who, swearing as lustily as the serving men, and brandishing the horsewhip, dashed into the scene of action, and with a few well applied cuts liberated the divine. Enraged at her interference, and smarting from the application of the whip, Blackadder drew a petronel from his girdle, and levelled it at her head, but ere he could discharge it, the weapon was stricken from his grasp, and a second blow on the head from the butt end of the whip felled him from his horse. Seeing the fate of his companion, the other serving man fled, leaving Bess mistress of the field. The rector thanked her heartily for the service she had rendered him, and complimented her on her prowess. "Ey neawn done mitch to burst on a leathering them two sour faced rapscallions," said Bess, with becoming modesty. "Simon Blackadder and I had many a tussle together afore this, for he's a foul tempered fellow, and canna drink about fighting, but he allus finds me more nor his match. But save us, your reverence, what were those ill favoured gullions riding after you for? Firrups tak 'em if they dinna mean to rob you, surely."
"Their object was to make me prisoner, and carry me back to Rough Lee, Bess," replied Holden. "They wished to prevent me from going to Whalley, whither I am bound, to procure help from Sir Ralph Assheton, to liberate Master Roger Nowell and his attorney, who are forcibly detained by Mistress Nutter." "You may spare your horse and yourself the journey, then, reverend sir," replied Bess, "for yo'n find Sir Thomas Metcalfe, with some 20 or 30 followers, armed with bills, halberts, petronels, and calivers, at Goldshaw, and they win go will you at once, I'm sartain. I heerd summat chaps say as how Sir Thomas is going to take possession of Mistress Robinson's house, Raydale Hall, i' Wensleydale, but nae doubt he'll go fust with your reverence, specially as he bears Mistress Nutter a grudge." "At all events, I will ask him," said Holden. "Are he and his followers lodged at your house, Bess?" "Yea," replied the hostess. "Some on 'em are. Some on 'em are in the house, some are in the barn, and some i' the stables. The place is altogether overrun wi' 'em. I were so moidet and worritit wi' their cawing and bawling for ale and drink, that I swore they should na ha another drop wi' my consent, and to be as good as my word, I clept key at cellar in my pocket, and leaving our Margaret to answer 'em, I set out as you see, intending to go as far as the mill, and comfort poor deevily rotted Baldwin in his trouble." "A most praiseworthy resolution, Bess," said the rector. "But what is to be done with this fellow?" he added, pointing to Blackadder, who, though badly hurt, was trying to creep towards the petronel, which was lying at a little distance from him on the ground. Perceiving his intention, Bess quickly dismounted, and, possessing herself of the weapon, stepped aside, and, slipping off one of the bands that confined the hose on her well shaped leg, grasped the wounded man by the shoulders, and with great expedition tied his hands behind his back. She then lifted him up with as much ease as if he had been an infant, and set him upon his horse with his face towards the tail. This done, she gave the bridle to the rector, and, handing him the petronel at the same time, told him to take care of his prisoner, for she must pursue her journey; and with this, in spite of his renewed entreaties that she would go back with him, she sprang on her horse and rode off. On arriving at Goldshaw with his prisoner, the rector at once proceeded to the hostel, in front of which he found several of the villagers assembled, attracted by the numerous company within doors, whose shouts and laughter could be heard at a considerable distance. Holden's appearance with Blackadder occasioned considerable surprise, and all eagerly gathered round him to learn what had occurred; but without satisfying their curiosity, beyond telling them that he had been attacked by the prisoner, he left him in their custody, and entered the house, where he found all the benches in the principal room occupied by a crew of half drunken roisterers, with flagons of ale before them; for, after Bess's departure with the key, they had broken into the cellar, and, broaching a cask, helped themselves to its contents. Various weapons were scattered about the tables, or reared against the walls, and the whole scene looked like a carouse by a band of marauders. Little respect was shown the rector, and he was saluted by many a ribald jest as he pushed his way towards the inner room. Sir Thomas was drinking with a couple of desperadoes, whose long rapiers and tarnished military equipments seemed to announce that they had, at some time or other, belonged to the army, though their ruffianly looks and braggadocio air and discourse, strongly seasoned with oaths and slang, made it evident that they were now little better than Alsatian bullies. They had, in fact, been hired by Sir Thomas for the expedition on which he was bent, as he could find no one in the country upon whom he could so well count as on them. Eyeing the rector fiercely as he intruded into their privacy, they glanced at their leader, to ask whether they should turn him out, but, receiving no encouragement for such rudeness, they contented themselves with scowling at him from beneath their bent brows, twisting up their shaggy moustaches, and trifling with the hilts of their rapiers. Holden opened his business at once, and as soon as Sir Thomas heard it, he sprang upon his feet, and, swearing a great oath, declared he would storm Rough Lee, and burn it to the ground, if Mistress Nutter did not set the two captives free.
"As to the audacious witch herself, I will carry her off in the spite of the devil her master," he cried. "How say you, Captain Gauntlet? And you too, Captain Storks? Is not this an expedition to your taste, ha?"
The two worthies appealed to responded joyously that it was so, and it was then agreed that Blackadder should be brought in and interrogated, as some important information might be obtained from him. Upon this, Captain Gauntlet left the room to fetch him, and presently afterwards returned, dragging in the prisoner, who looked dogged and angry, by the shoulders.
"Hark ye, fellow,"
said Sir Thomas, sternly.
"if you do not answer the questions I shall put to you truly and satisfactorily, I will have you taken out into the yard and shot like a dog. Thus much promised, I shall proceed with my examination. Master Roger Nowell and Master Thomas Potts, you are aware, are unlawfully detained prisoners by Mistress Alice Nutter, so I have been called upon by the reverend gentleman here to undertake their liberation. But before doing so, I desire to know from you what defensive and offensive preparations your mistress has made, and whether you judge it likely she will attempt to hold out her house against us."
"Most assuredly she will,"
replied Blackadder.
"and against twice your force. Roughly is her strength.